Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
It was an accident. We know that. The fire at the Iroquois Theatre was caused by a malfunctioning spotlight, a spark that caught a curtain and ballooned into a disaster that took the lives of roughly 600 people in just a matter of minutes. What killed those people wasn't nefarious intent. It was something far more insidious. Negligence. Negligence born of misplaced priorities, cost-cutting, and willful ignorance. And while negligence is often framed as a lesser wrong, an unfortunate oversight, it can be criminal, especially when it results in hundreds of deaths in a single afternoon. Too often, people fall back on a lack of intent as proof of innocence, as if not meaning to cause harm absolves them of responsibility. But intent isn't required when your actions or your failure to act turn predictable risk into mass tragedy. After the Iroquois Theatre burned, Chicago was roiling with the desire to hold someone accountable, and many people should have been held responsible. The people who locked exit doors, the designers who violated safety requirements, the inspectors and operators who absolutely knew better. But accountability doesn't live in outrage. It lives in the law, and the law is an imperfect thing. Legal accountability hinges on definitions, authority, and jurisdiction. And when those legal frameworks fail, they can take a tragedy like the Iroquois Theatre Fire and strip away the opportunity to meaningfully punish the people responsible. No one went to prison for what happened at the Iroquois Theatre. Not because no one was at fault, but because the law at the time was not built to deal with mass negligence. Legal accountability may have failed, but moral accountability is much harder to escape. Today, on the conclusion of Fireproof, the Iroquois Theatre Fire, we're talking about how hundreds of victims and their families were denied accountability, and how a city responded when justice failed. Right now, on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, a former firefighter, and a woman too stubborn to take a week off from the podcast.
And I'm still full of turkey and tater salad.
Thanks for joining us. This is episode 94, which means we've been doing this for 84 weeks straight without a single break. And we are right on the cusp of hitting numbers that will give this show real traction. With over 4,000 of you tuning in every month, we are really close, but we need your help to get over that ridge before I burn out completely. Here's how you can help. It's easy. Go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, or an episode comment. Don't know how? Email me. I will absolutely hold your hand through it. That's how important this is. Right now we're sitting at 60 ratings on Apple Podcasts and 60 on Spotify, and while symmetry is nice, traction is nicer. Without ratings, reviews, and comments, the algorithm will not push us out. I cannot afford a PR team, so I am relying on you, and those few minutes make a real difference. Thank you to Allosaurus Rex for your Apple Podcast review this week. Steve loves you, and Paris Hilton probably does too. Also, thank you to Jenny. Those of you may remember her as my original co-host, and she left us a Spotify comment this week. All of you should be like Jenny. Go leave comments. And to our Podbean commenters, Jennifer Callan79, Kleptocrat, CNKRTBQY, NZJVNNQR, and...
What is this, alphabet soup you're reading?
Yes. And Becky Beasley, we thank you so much for your engagement this week. So please go leave those ratings, reviews, and comments because we truly need them. Other ways you can support the show include joining us on Patreon, where you can get all of the episodes ad-free. We've got a bonus episode recorded for Patreon. I just need to finish editing it, and our latest newsletter is in the works. For those of you in the Inner Sanctum, you will be receiving your annual gift in January, and I cannot wait for you to see what it is. When you join Patreon, you are helping us afford the $1,500 in court records that I need to pay for an upcoming series. But if financial support isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You will still get Crime to Burn for free on all of your favorite podcast apps, just with the ads. And you can still help us by following us on social media, including X, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and by liking, commenting, and sharing our content to help us find our audience. Send us your fire stories, case suggestions, feedback, and New Year's Eve plans at crimetoburn@gmail.com. And don't forget, your Crime to Burn merch is available using the link to our spread shop in the show notes.
Nice pitch. Good job.
Thanks. Last week I told you about the Iroquois Theatre Fire, how a malfunctioning spotlight ignited a curtain high above the stage. Because the fire started overhead, the theater's kill fire extinguisher was ineffective. The flames spread quickly into the stage scenery, which then collapsed down onto the stage below. Now, in a situation like this, the proscenium curtain, which at the time was intended to be an asbestos curtain designed to keep fire and smoke confined to the stage, should have protected the audience. But it didn't, because the curtain became stuck. When the rear stage doors were opened so that the cast could evacuate, a rush of oxygen was drawn into the building, intensifying the fire. And with only one smoke vent operable, the airflow from that open door pushed the flames and smoke out beneath the stuck proscenium curtain and directly into the audience area. The fire spread rapidly over the flammable upholstered seating, and exit doors were locked. Fire escapes were incomplete, and some exits were hidden behind curtains for aesthetic reasons. And despite being advertised as fireproof, the Iroquois Theatre became a death trap, killing roughly 600 people in just a matter of minutes. So we know what went wrong. We know that the fire at the Iroquois Theatre was accidental. There was no nefarious intent, no arsonist lurking in the wings to take out a theater full of children. But intent isn't required to establish criminal behavior. Negligence can be criminal. And when a theater is allowed to operate with incomplete exits, locked doors, smoke and heat vents bolted shut, no sprinklers, and a long list of known hazards, that negligence is obvious. The public understood that. And in the days after the fire, the city of Chicago demanded that those responsible be held to account. Now, normally, when we talk about criminal accountability, we start with motive, with who wanted to commit a crime and why. But negligence investigations work very differently. Instead of narrowing in on intent, investigators cast a wide net, looking at everyone who had responsibility for how the building was designed, constructed, and operated. And when you look at it that way, the list of potential people responsible for these hundreds of deaths was long. Longer than the wait for an Uber on New Year's Eve. This list of people under scrutiny was vast. It included the theater's owners, the stage crew operating the spotlight, the backstage firefighter, required by the city, who failed to extinguish the fire, the company that manufactured the curtain that mechanically failed, the theater company that produced the show. It also included the building inspector, the architect, and the fire marshal. It included the actors who told the audience to wait before evacuating, the ushers who didn't unlock the doors, the ticket booth staff, because a single switch existed in the ticket booth that would have brought up the house lights and helped people find the exits in the dark, the ticket sellers that had oversold the show, contributing to the overcrowding. It even included the construction company that failed to complete the fire escapes and the smoke and heat vents. And ultimately, it reached all the way to the mayor of Chicago, who allowed the theater to open and operate despite the building being incomplete. No one who had touched that building was immune from scrutiny over whether their actions or inaction contributed to the disaster. And the scrutiny didn't stop there. It even extended to the audience themselves. In the rush to assign blame after the Iroquois Theatre Fire, some people accused the victims of being responsible for their own deaths.
Really?
They argued that panic had caused a stampede, and that if everyone had simply remained calm, there should have been plenty of time to evacuate. Now, this kind of thinking shows up after nearly every mass tragedy. And I'll just say this. It is always the smallest minds that reach for victim blaming when the alternative is confronting systemic failure. Victim blaming almost always comes from people who weren't present, People who don't understand the conditions inside the building or how panic emerges only after every reasonable option has been exhausted. Because here's the truth. In fires, people tend to show altruistic behavior long before any everyone for themselves panic sets in.
Like early morning Black Friday.
Yeah, I don't think they're really known for altruistic behavior.
No, I mean, you get the panic and the conflagration.
Yeah. It is a well-documented phenomenon, and it's driven by this shared sense of we're all in this together. And when you listen to survivor accounts from the Iroquois Theatre Fire, they all tell the same story. Not of panic, but of people that were haunted by the strangers that they tried to save and couldn't. But the mayor wasn't pointing fingers at the victims. He was pointing fingers at the city's aldermen. Now, in 1903, Chicago's leadership structure placed the mayor as the chief executive, alongside a city council made up of 70 aldermen representing 35 wards. And in this era, the balance of power strongly favored the aldermen. They were often described as acting like little mayors within their own wards, wielding enormous influence over local services, permits, inspections, and enforcement decisions. This informal authority even had a name: aldermanic privilege. And by 1903, tensions between the mayor and the aldermen were already high. Chicago was infamous for political grift, where greasing the right palms could earn favorable treatment. The mayor at the time, Carter Harrison Jr., openly accused many aldermen of operating like gangsters, and he wasn't alone. The press and social reformers widely viewed Chicago's aldermen as deeply corrupt, but they also argued that the corruption thrived because of the weak leadership at the top. Their criticism of Harrison was blunt. They believed he saw the corruption as just too entrenched to fight, and so he simply didn't try. And it's worth noting that just 8 weeks before the Iroquois Theatre Fire, Chicago's aldermen received a report from the city's building commissioner, George Williams. The subject of that report was clear: the risks associated with theaters. And along with it came a proposal for new city ordinances specifically addressing theater safety. But the aldermen did not act on it. Instead, the ordinance was sent to the Judiciary Committee and a stay was ordered, meaning that any enforcement action against theaters already in violation was suspended until the committee reported back on a revised version of the ordinance. If it's true, and historical accounts suggest it was, that the aldermen of the era were known for accepting bribes in exchange for influence, then it's not unreasonable to question whether that delay played a role, especially when the Iroquois Theatre had opened without a sprinkler system, despite the existing ordinances that required one. But suspicion is not proof. And while this timing raises uncomfortable questions, no evidence ever surfaced that could legally establish that the delay was the result of corrupt deals rather than just political maneuvering. Meanwhile, the building owners were busy doing some finger-pointing of their own. They told Chicago newspapers that the backstage firefighter had thrown kill fire at the fire, and that since the fire wasn't extinguished, the kill fire itself must have been ineffective. What they conveniently ignored was how kill fire actually worked. It relied on gravity to keep the smoldering agent on top of the fire, and on a vertical fire climbing a curtain, gravity wasn't exactly on their side. The kill fire just never stood a chance. It didn't mean it was an ineffective product. The owners also joined the city's more intellectually flexible voices in blaming the victims. They argued that the building had enough exit capacity to empty the entire theater, and that panic, not the building, was responsible for the deaths.
Y'all dumb as hell, now you're dead. How you like them apples?
What they did not address were the inoperable smoke and heat vents, the failed proscenium curtain, the locked exit doors, or the incomplete fire escapes. Which makes a certain amount of sense. When you're trying to present yourself as innocent in the eyes of the law, it's best not to dwell on the parts of the building that you were actually responsible for. It also turned out that the building owners had cut corners in other ways. When the proscenium curtain, the very one that failed, was examined after the fire, investigators discovered that it wasn't what it was supposed to be. the owners had purchased a cheaper, inferior curtain to save money. A chemist who analyzed the material concluded that it was made largely of wood pulp, with only a small amount of asbestos woven into it. And here's the part that matters most. Under the way Chicago city ordinances were written at the time, the curtain technically complied with the law. It met the letter of the ordinance. It did contain asbestos. But it didn't meet the intent. The curtain was never truly capable of preventing fire from spreading from the stage to the audience. Was the curtain's failure a direct result of that cost-cutting choice? Possibly. But because the curtain became caught on a lighting rig as it was deployed, it's ultimately impossible to say with certainty. The insurance underwriters blamed the city for allowing the theater to operate despite not meeting existing building ordinances for theaters. You see, the theater was required to have a sprinkler system, but it hadn't been designed with one. In addition, it was required to have a standpipe system to provide interior hoses for firefighting purposes. And while it had been designed to include one, it wasn't complete at the time of the fire, offering no water-based fire suppression systems in the building at all.
So they've got a circle jerk of blame shifting going on.
And that wasn't the building's only problem. At the time, city ordinances required each balcony to have its own separate exit stair. The Iroquois Theatre didn't comply. Instead, it used a single common stair to serve all balcony levels. And this decision actually came down to one surprising factor: vanity. The idea was that if everyone used the same stairwell, patrons in the cheapest upper balcony seats would share the same experience as those seated on the main floor or in the expensive box seats. Anyone seen ascending the grand staircase from the lobby could plausibly be anyone, wealthy, important, or neither. But the unintended consequence of that decision was deadly. By forcing all balcony traffic into a single stair, occupants from multiple levels merged into one flow, creating bottlenecks that simply would not have existed if the ordinance requiring separate stairs had been followed. The city's fire chief placed the blame squarely on the firefighter who had been assigned to the theater that night. The chief argued that the on-duty firefighter knew there were no sprinklers, that the fire escapes were incomplete, and that the standpipe system wasn't fully functional, and that he had failed to report those deficiencies up the chain of command at the Chicago Fire Department.
That seems really cheap, throwing the fire chief under the bus like that.
No, the fire chief was throwing the firefighter under the bus.
I mean, that's what I meant. That seems really cheap, throwing the subordinate under the bus.
It is.
You're supposed to jump under the bus, right?
Yeah. The firefighter disputed that account. He stated that in the past, when he had attempted to raise similar concerns, he was waved off, discouraged from escalating issues that leadership already knew about and had chosen not to worry about. Some citizens also raised concerns about the role of the Chicago Fire Department itself. It was noted that members of the department had been gifted tickets to the theater during its opening weeks. And in the aftermath of the fire, that detail fueled suspicion that enforcement had been intentionally lax, that known safety issues were being overlooked rather than confronted. The fire department's attorney responded by deflecting blame away from the department and directing it instead at Fuller Construction Company, the firm responsible for the work that had never been completed.
The circle widens.
The construction labor unions quickly piled on. They accused Fuller of hiring unskilled workers in an effort to exploit the labor unrest during ongoing city strikes. And according to the unions, those cost-cutting decisions slowed construction. But rather than delay the theater's opening, the owners chose to open anyway, with an incomplete building. The result was a building placed into service with critical life safety systems unfinished, including the smoke and heat vents and the fire escapes. And the controversy didn't end there. The Fuller Construction Company was later accused of making matters worse when contractors were reportedly found on the theater's roof the day after the fire, and they had accessed the roof from an adjoining building and were allegedly removing the restraints that had prevented those additional smoke and heat vents from operating before the city inspectors could have the opportunity to examine them. The theater's architect was also blamed for designing a building that failed to meet Chicago's ordinances. Now, he conceded that going forward, he would use less flammable furnishings and upholstery, but he stood by one decision in particular, hiding the exit doors behind curtains for aesthetic reasons. He maintained that this was a valid design choice. History disagreed.
What's behind door number 3? It's the emergency exit.
And that very decision, prioritizing appearance over visibility, is why modern building and fire codes now explicitly prohibit placing decor, drapery, or curtains over exit doors. And when the arrests finally came, no one was spared. Carpenters, stagehands, actors, the owners, the building commissioner, and eventually even the mayor. Now, most of them were charged with manslaughter in connection with the Iroquois Theatre Fire. And ultimately, after the coroner's inquest, during which dozens of witnesses testified, including actors, stagehands, fire department personnel, and construction workers, the scope of responsibility finally began to narrow. Those that the coroner's inquest recommended be sent to a grand jury were Carter Harrison Jr., the mayor, Fire Marshal Musham, the theater owner Will Davis, Building Commissioner George Williams, Building Inspector Laughlin, House Fireman John Salers, Stage Carpenter Cummings, and of course the light operator McMullen. Now, theater owner Will Davis was charged because, as president and general manager, he was legally responsible for making sure that city ordinances were observed. And prosecutors argued that he had failed to ensure his employees were properly trained or instructed of their duties in the event of a fire.
That sounds actually kind of reasonable.
Mayor Carter Harrison Jr. was charged for failing to enforce existing ordinances through the city departments under his authority, including the fire marshal's office and the building inspectors.
That also sounds reasonable.
Building Commissioner George Williams was charged with gross neglect of duty for allowing the theater to open despite it being incomplete and out of compliance with building ordinances.
This is a lot of reasonability in a row. This is unusual.
Fire Marshal Musham was also charged with gross neglect of duty for failing to enforce those same ordinances, a failure he acknowledged during the inquest when he admitted he had never even read them and did not realize enforcement was part of his responsibility.
Then that's highly appropriate. Wow. How do this many things make sense?
The house firefighter on duty, William Salers, was charged with neglect for failing to report the lack of firefighting equipment to his superiors. And finally, the technical staff were charged as well. The light operator, McMullen, was accused of negligent handling of the spotlight, and stage carpenter Cummings was charged for failing to provide proper protection around the lighting to prevent an accidental ignition.
Oh, wow. Now they're on kind of a warpath.
Yeah. Now, the mayor was ultimately cleared.
Of course.
During testimony, several department heads stated that Carter Harrison Jr. had issued a blanket order directing the license department not to issue theater licenses unless the building commissioner confirmed that inspections had been completed and approval granted. So based on that testimony, responsibility shifted away from the mayor and onto the enforcement chain beneath him. As a result, Harrison was not indicted by the grand jury, but the press was furious. The Chicago Tribune responded to the mayor being cleared of legal responsibility by labeling him, quote, one-third of an evil trinity, unquote.
Wow. That's negative press.
In the court of public opinion, his acquittal didn't look anything like innocence. The grand jury, however, was more lenient when it came to Governor Harrison, and in its findings, the jury concluded what was needed was, quote, a more intelligent administration of city hall departments, unquote.
Well, couldn't we all use a little bit of that?
Yeah. The grand jury, however, wasn't limited to the individuals named by the coroner's inquest. It expanded the scope of the case to include Thomas Noonan, who was the theater's business manager. Now, Noonan, along with stage carpenter James Cummings and theater owner Joseph Davis, they were all formally indicted by the grand jury on charges of manslaughter. Musham, the fire marshal, Salers, the firefighter, and McMullen, the light operator, all had their charges dismissed by the grand jury for a lack of evidence. Now, the dismissal of Fire Chief Musham's charges was the most baffling. As the fire chief, code enforcement was explicitly part of his duties under those city ordinances. Ordinances he admitted during testimony that he had never actually read. That said, I do agree with the grand jury when it comes to Salers and McMullen. The on-duty firefighter and the light operator were not the ones responsible for the systemic failures that made this fire so deadly. Instead, the grand jury issued indictments against 2 men, Building Commissioner George Williams and Building Inspector Laughlin, charging them both with palpable omission of duty. But when it came to the manslaughter indictments against James Cummings, Will Davis, and Thomas Noonan, the prosecution ran into some fatal legal problems. Under the law, the court required the prosecutors to prove which specific act by each defendant caused which specific death in order for there to proceed with the manslaughter charge.
That's a smart lawyer.
For example, dozens of people were found dead in a corridor outside of a locked exit door. But legally, the defendants couldn't be charged with 30 anonymous deaths. The prosecutors had to identify which individual deaths were directly caused by that locked door and who precisely was responsible for locking it. After the fire, records documented the number of victims found in each location, but not their identities. And without names and without individual attribution, the prosecution couldn't meet the legal standard required for manslaughter at the time.
Well, because you can't just say, hey, you killed Joe Bob. Okay, where was Joe Bob when you found him? Well, we don't know. It does sound like crap, doesn't it?
Yeah. And because of that evidentiary gap, defense counsel successfully moved to have the manslaughter indictments against Davis, Noonan, and Cummings quashed. It wasn't that these 3 men bore no responsibility for what happened. What failed here was the system itself, the law, the way evidence was collected, and the court's inability to apply common sense when rigid legal standards collapsed under the weight of mass death. Responsibility existed. The law simply wasn't equipped to recognize it. But the case wasn't over yet. You see, double jeopardy doesn't apply until a jury has been sworn in or a judge has begun hearing evidence in a bench trial. Because these charges were quashed in a motion hearing, the prosecution was legally allowed another attempt, provided they believed they could correct the evidentiary problems. Unwilling to let the matter die, prosecutors convened a second grand jury. This time, theater owner Will Davis, building inspector Laughlin, and building commissioner George Williams were re-indicted, all 3 once again facing manslaughter charges. Unlike the first round of indictments, the scope had narrowed, because this grand jury did not re-indict the other men. Davis was tried first. Now, his attorney argued that under the Illinois Constitution and the state statutes, the city of Chicago possessed only those powers that were expressly delegated to it by the state legislature. And no such power, he argued, had ever actually been delegated to the Chicago City Council to enforce the fire safety requirements at issue. As a result, the delegation of authority to the Chicago Board of Fire Underwriters, the body that required sprinkler systems and the other fire suppression and life safety measures, lacked any legal power to create or enforce binding ordinances. In other words, the safety rules existed, but the legal authority to enforce them did not. Without enforceable ordinances, the prosecution could not establish the statutory duty required to prove manslaughter. And without that duty, there is insufficient legal evidence to hold Davis criminally responsible, and he was acquitted. The judge made it clear that this was not a declaration of innocence. He all but said that Davis was morally guilty, but his obligation was to apply the law as written, not as it should have been. And once Davis was acquitted, the remaining cases collapsed. The charges against Laughlin and Williams were never actually brought to trial. And in the end, no one would be held criminally accountable. Not because responsibility didn't exist, but because the law failed to assign it. An imperfect system written by imperfect people left a loophole wide enough for accountability to disappear, even as it acknowledged that the safety requirements themselves were necessary. Despite the acquittal, more than 200 civil lawsuits were filed by the victims and their families. But in the end, no one actually received compensation. The theater's liability insurance was held by Maryland Casualty Company, with a policy limit of only $10,000 per accident and $5,000 per life. And even that coverage proved meaningless, because the policy explicitly excluded liability for injury or death caused by boiler explosions, the use of explosives, or fire. In other words, the very risk that destroyed the theater was the one thing the insurance refused to cover. And today, when we open the building and fire codes that govern theaters, the legacy of those lost in the Iroquois Theatre Fire is there, written between the lines. Doors and assembly occupancies with 50 or more occupants are required to swing outward in the direction of egress. Exits are not permitted to be obscured by draperies or hidden behind mirrors or concealed by decor. They have to be clearly marked with illuminated exit signs. Emergency lighting is required, fire alarm systems are required, sprinkler systems are required, and they have to all be maintained. Fire-resistant proscenium curtains are still required, and they must operate independently of power. Locking exit doors in an occupied building is strictly prohibited. Panic hardware, those doors with the push bars that open when you hit them, they exist because of the Iroquois Theatre Fire. They were invented in its aftermath by Carl Prenzler, an Indianapolis hardware salesman, along with his neighbor, Henry DuPont. Prenzler actually had tickets for that December 30th performance at the Iroquois Theatre, but he missed the show because of a business meeting.
How fortunate.
And even today, before a performance begins, you're told to locate your nearest exit when you go to the theater. And that practice echoes something survivor Harriet Bray Crumpacker said that she did for the rest of her life after escaping the fire. Harriet was the very last known survivor of the Iroquois Theatre Fire, and she died in 1978 at the age of 86. She once recalled that after escaping the burning theater, she hid beneath the legs of the horses that had pulled Engine 13 to the scene. The reforms born from the Iroquois Theatre Fire spread far beyond the city of Chicago. They spread across the United States and even into some European countries, shaping not only theaters, but buildings like schools, churches, and offices. Every time you walk into a public space and trust that you'll be able to walk back out, you're relying on lessons that were written in the smoke and the panic and the loss of the Iroquois Theatre. This has been Fireproof, the Iroquois Theatre Fire on Crime to Burn.
No one knows we went anywhere.
We went places. We returned. Why is there a leaf blower in the den?
Where do you keep yours?
I should get one of those sweatshirts with a cat pocket in it, because she wants to sit on me if I'm sitting down.
I want to get a beard bird.
I support a beard bird.
You usually feel funny? Isn't feeling funny like a symptom?
She stuck her head in the leaf blower.
I know how to get her out of there if she gets stuck. This episode's brought to you by Curious Kittens. How adorable. The kitten has escaped and is causing chaos. This is going well. Gotta outthink the kitten.
She's fast, man. I put her in his lap and she jumped down, and by the time I turned around, she beat me out of the room. So what do you want to do for New Year's Eve?
Sleep. What is there to do? Are there options? Is there like a menu?
It says the world's unluckiest Christmas decoration just met another unfortunate fate. The Yavla goat, best known for burning down, a few years ago was eaten by birds, but now it's met a new fate. In the wake of Storm Johannes, Yavla was battered by strong winds of more than 40 miles per hour, and the goat came crashing to the ground shortly after lunchtime on Saturday.
They need to get like a goat wind tunnel to test these things in.
It is a sad-looking goat right now.
You have to work on the aerodynamics of this goat.
So there goes my New Year's Eve plans.
Well, question though, why don't they just pick it back up?
It's like weighs tons. Like they put it up with cranes. So if you listen to our episode last Christmas on the Yavla goat did survive last Christmas season, but it has not survived this Christmas season. However, it was not a victim of arson, as is the tradition. It was a victim of a windstorm, and it fell down. Today, apparently.
Goat down. I repeat, goat down.
And if you haven't listened to our episode on the Yavla goat, you should go listen to it. It's interesting.
It's a big goat.
If our town was going to make a giant decoration to put up every year, what would it be?
Our town is a giant decoration.
But if they wanted to, like, up the ante and build something that arsonists could target every year, what would it be?
Oh man, I think I strained my eyes rolling them.
Maybe you'll latch on to something.
Like a nipple.
Each month we are close.
Ooh, that was really close to me. Get your together, Musser.
I still feel like I'm out of breath.
You really ran through that, man. You take a drink, you deserve.
Okay, it's going to make me burp again, but okay. Curtain high above the stage. My butt just vibrated.
Am I supposed to use my imagination as to why?
I got a message. I'm going to put it on Do Not Disturb.
Back, demon! What is that voice that you do sometimes?
Do not disturb. My mom used to do a voice like this.
That's what happened to you. I twisted you.
You don't like my voice?
No.
How a malfunctioning spotlight ignited a curtain high above the stage.
Jesus Christ. There's got to be something in my contract that prevents this sort of behavior. If not, there's fixing to be.
I'm sorry. I can't resist.
This is some kind of workplace harassment.
Okay, I'll
I'm going to
stop.
talk to HR in a minute. Ever do that again? I'm going to throw some shit.
Lucky for me, I'm the HR department.
Lucky for me, I got a sharpened steak somewhere. I will choke you.
I'll stop.
Half to death.
Only half, huh?
I'll let you see little stars, then bring it back.
Some girls like that.
It doesn't seem healthy.
It doesn't. And I don't see how that's enjoyable.
See, I intended it as a threat.
Yeah, it seems threatening.
It seems somewhat violent. Chicks are twisted.
Not all of them.
Most of them.
Am I twisted?
This feels like a trap.
I just want to know what you think.
Yes.
What about me is twisted?
Your poor brain. This is fun to you. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Saying the things you enjoy lend one to believe you might be a little twisted. That's where the kid gets it from. You're just determined to creep me out in some way today.
I have not used my third lip. I'll try to hold it together.
Your third lip?
No. Hang on, I think I have to burp.
Oh, do it. Give me a little gas. Come on. My ass is numb and yet it hurts.
I thought you were getting up to get a beer.
Oh, that's a good idea. Have you ever had a palpable omission of duty? Palpable omission of duty?
Nope, I haven't had
Your
that.
hand, you see what I'm doing with my hand? Like a grippy motion?
I see it now.
Palpable omission of duty.
And it's scarring me. I don't know.
Those words shouldn't be together. I like my delusions, thank you. What the hell are we talking about?
This is a public service announcement reminding you that safety regulations were written because of people who are no longer alive. If a rule feels annoying, inconvenient, or unnecessary, that's because it is preventing a very specific tragedy that already happened. Enjoy your evening accordingly. This episode's brought to you by Bad Decisions, because hindsight is always perfectly clear and tragically useless. Just remember, if you're going to kiss a stranger on New Year's Eve, it's cold and flu season. I don't think you should kiss strangers during cold and flu season.
I don't think you should kiss strangers at all.
People are going to kiss strangers on New Year's.
They are?
Oh, yeah.
This is not hygienic. Like on the cheek or like
Nope.
full on the mouth?
Full on the mouth. With tongue.
Ooh! I'm just saying, if someone tries to accost me with their third lip, I'm going to make it fat. So the full circle of this jerkle is that no one ended up with the toast. That's a fancy word.
It's a fancy word. Like my pants.
Fancy in your pansy.
11 years ago, we were on our honeymoon right now.
Yeah. You think there were cameras in that place? I still feel suspicious about it.
Well, I haven't found us on Pornhub. I cannot drink these without getting really belchy.
I think that's a feature.
Oh, that's a feature?
Until next time, locate your exits and don't be the reason we have to make another rule.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
Welcome to Primetime Crime Podcast. I am your host, Kylie, and in this podcast, we are going to deep dive into some lesser-known unsolved true crime cases, from missing persons to unsolved homicides. This is the place where we are going to unpack it all, research it all, talk about it all, and try to bring justice to these families after all of these years. We are going to take it one story at a time, one case at a time, and hopefully justice will be ours. I hope you all will join me on this journey. You can find me at Primetime Crime, wherever you get your podcasts.